This is the Levy Park neighborhood of Tallahassee. Levy Park was built after World War II. You can tell from some of the houses here, largely to accommodate, I think, soldiers returning from World War II. This property of theirs, this land, had a much older use than that, however. I'm Bob Holliday, president of the Tallahassee Historical Society, and with me is Lynn McClarty, longtime member, longtime board member, historian, researcher extraordinaire, and so forth. And this area, there's a long backstory with this, but this area, after the Civil War, and Lynn, into the 20th century maybe, or was it? Was the old Tallahassee Fairgrounds and also horse race track.
Fairgrounds started changing and it went closer to town, eventually getting to Centennial Park, and there's a history down there of Mitchell Street. One time they wanted to have it on corner of Mitchell and Benton, and they booted that down. But that was part of one of the places for a fairgrounds at one time. I think it was the 40s in the early 30s.
Well, for those of us wondering how we came to this subject, this all started a year ago when we had a program on African American horse racing, and we filmed it down near Lake Ella, which I think all of us thought was the site of the antebellum racetrack in Tallahassee. But three of our ace researchers, that would be Lynn, that would be Claude Kennison, who is behind me, and that would be Doug Smith, began to ask questions about that. And so the three of them researched this, and they've found enough material so that we are going to have a program on the Tallahassee Racetrack and Fairgrounds on March the 9th at Mission San Luis, and they drew straws to see who would present it, and Lynn lost, so he gets to present it on March the 9th.
And do the research.
And do the research.
Having done the research, yes.
Talk a little bit about the whole legacy of horse racing and so forth in Tallahassee.
Well, if we specifically talk horse racing, I think we're going to find two different times that this took place, and one was in the 1830s into the 40s, and that gave Tallahassee a kind of a bad name of the illicit behavior that went on in that time.
Let me say this about horse racing in Tallahassee. I mean, particularly before the Civil War, this was a spectator sport that could become pretty violent in a lot of ways. I mean, I love the story about how in the early 1840s, the governor of I guess the territory of Florida then was forced to call troops back from the First Seminole War in order to quell the violence at the racetrack. And that'll tell you how seriously people took it. I love that story.
It's a good story, yeah. Thankfully, the mayor at that time was Francis Epps, and he, through the council, put a stop to it.
Right.
And he told them we couldn't do this anymore.
Here. And one reason we're filming this here today is that we're going to put a historical marker here in Levy Park, marking this area, and it took quite a bit of research. Lynn, talk to us a little bit about the research aspect of this.
It was. I have to go back and say that this was a challenge to start this project anyway. I had been so involved with Trinity and their records, and I've done a lot of research for Trinity, but this was one of those that the challenge with that meeting with those guys and saying they thought it was one place and once the other. I accepted that internally and started looking for deeds and through newspaper clippings, and this culminated in finding truly where the fairgrounds were. articles in the paper said the fairgrounds were behind the armory, that they gave no other source to validate that. And if you were at the armory, you look up the hill and you say, well, there's no way for a race course to be on any place other than a flat surface. So my search went to the 1879 deed where John A. Craig sold 19 3/4 acres to the Middle Florida Agricultural and Mechanical Association.
Wow.
And it was very explicit, and the challenge in this part too was taking those deeds that were written in chains and links, converting it and putting it on paper, and then subsequently overlaying what I had found in 1879 to present day. In the present day, the limits of the old fairgrounds are here on flat ground. I mean, I asked people that are interested in this before the presentation in March is to drive over here and ride the streets between 7th, Martin Luther King, and Milton. And when Mr. Green, one street's named after him, bought this property in 1927, he developed it. But in his deed also, it says very explicit, the old fairgrounds, 19 3/4 acres.
Wow.
Now you go from the time that they sold, that John Craig sold it, to the time that Mr. Green developed it, and we get the same reading in subsequent deeds through that time.
Do we know how long the racetrack was?
It's a half mile.
A half mile.
Half mile. And also, one article said that the racetrack was on the west side of the fairgrounds. So we're putting it on Milton Street within the confines of these streets that I just mentioned.
I mean, the importance of horses for sporting purposes in Tallahassee is pretty significant.
This, when they built the track, and it was built track with stands, so the people would not have to have a gradation of property,
right,
so that they had to sit on the side of a hill. They were in the stands, and this was built here. And not only did they have horse racing, but they had marine tournaments, and they had surreys or trotting horses like that. The ladies walked the half-mile track, and they were in competition who could walk the fastest.
Oh, really?
Yes. And then, as I said, marine tournaments, and then bicycle races were there. And then they had gun shoots there. They had rifle shoots with using that facility right there. So all of this is going to be opened up to see how many resources. But on the fairgrounds, it was very similar to what we have there every year in October down
Sure.
at our fairgrounds off of Paul Russell Road. 3 buildings were designated for, as the buildings down there are, for the ladies to bring their canned goods or their sewing, whatever, very domestic parts of the fairgrounds.
I was really surprised to learn that ring tournaments in Tallahassee, and I'll ask you to explain what those were in a second, lasted into the 1870s here. I always thought that was, the Sir Walter Scott romantic pre-Civil War thing and so forth.
Well, they changed it out from one rider going against the other with his lance. So this was spearing a ring, maybe a ½ inch, and I have a slide that's going to show the gradation of these rings, and they would have to go through the lance onto that and bring it off of, it was hanging down. And this I have photographs to show how it was done. So this is part of what people have to look forward to by seeing my slides.
Well, this is so cool. Again, March the 9th, out at Mission San Luis, we will have a reception beginning at 5:30 with the program beginning at 6 out there. And we hope that everyone will come and listen to Lynn. This is really an important part of local Tallahassee history. And so we hope to see you there. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you for being with us this afternoon.
Thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity.